The late afternoon sun slanted through the vast picture windows of the Sterling family's grand estate in Buckhead, Atlanta, but it did little to dispel the inherent coldness of the enormous living room. Zendaya Amari Vance was on her knees on the flawless marble floor, meticulously wiping away the last smudge. Her long dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her rough, worn work clothes made her look completely out of place amid the surrounding luxury. She appeared more like a hired maid than Mrs. Sterling, the lady of the house. Crash! A sharp, jarring sound echoed through the room. A costly, fine porcelain teacup shattered right beside Zendaya's hand. Sharp fragments scattered, one slicing the back of her hand, leaving a track of vivid red blood. Zendaya froze, but did not lift her head. Seated on a designer sofa, Diane Cleo Sterling, her mother-in-law, watched her with crossed arms and a gaze as sharp as a razor. "What on earth are you doing? You don't even know how to properly clean the floor, or are you so ignorant that you didn't see I was having tea?" Zendaya remained silent. The hand holding the cleaning cloth clenched tight. She collected the pieces, trying to keep her blood from staining the stone. "Useless." Diahan's voice was laced with pure contempt. "Clean it again, and clean it until I decide it's clean." Zendaya merely nodded. She quietly went for a dustpan and a fresh cloth. 3 years of marriage, and she was already accustomed to this. The humiliation, the insults, the sheer disdain. At that moment, the roar of a sports car engine sounded outside the gate, and the front door opened. Jamal Orion Sterling strode in. He was wearing an impeccable, custom-tailored suit, his figure tall and his face handsome but cold. He was the CEO of the Sterling Group, the man everyone in Atlanta admired. He glanced at the living room, his eyes passing over Zendaya, kneeling on the floor, and the porcelain shards, as if she were simply air, an inanimate, decorative object. He did not even frown. "Jamal, my son, you're home." Diahan's expression instantly switched from severe to beaming. "Come here. Mama had your favorite seafood gumbo prepared." Jamal shook his head and walked straight to the bar, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. He never looked at Zendaya even once. "Mother, I can't stay for dinner." He tossed the whiskey back in a single gulp. "Kiana needs me." Zendaya's body tensed. Her hand, wiping the floor, paused for a moment. Kiana Sorrell, his beautiful and talented executive assistant, the woman the entire Sterling family, except for Zendaya, adored. Diahan looked sideways at Zendaya. "Well," she sighed, her voice heavy with implication, "you really should sort that out once and for all. Our family can't remain without an heir." She spoke loudly on purpose. "Look at that ignorant fool. She can't even hold a pregnancy, and worse, she's illiterate. If it weren't for old grandfather Theron forcing you before he passed, how could our family have brought this trash in to stain the house?" Every word was like a thorn piercing Zendaya's heart. Illiterate was the label Jamal Sterling had slapped on her since the first day she stepped into this house. 3 years earlier, Jamal's grandfather, Grandfather Theron, who had saved her life and her family's during a flash flood in their small community outside Columbia, South Carolina, made Jamal marry her. On his deathbed, he took her hand and told her that Jamal wasn't a bad person, only asking her to be patient. He was wrong. Jamal said nothing more. He turned, adjusted his shirt collar, and walked out. He came and went like a cold gust of wind, never stopping for her. The car engine roared again and then faded into the distance. In the massive living room, only Diahan and Zendaya remained. "What are you standing there for, you poor excuse?" Diahan yelled. "Go up to your room. Just looking at you gets on my nerves." Zendaya lowered her head, her hands clenching the cloth so tightly her knuckles turned white. She rose, silently cleaned the shards and the floor, and then headed for the service staircase leading to her cold attic room. She had been married for 3 years, living like a servant, an invisible shadow in her own home. in a setting completely opposite to the Sterling mansion, at the most luxurious restaurant in Atlanta, with a panoramic view of the illuminated downtown skyline. The soft sound of a violin blended with the clinking of crystal glasses. Jamal Sterling carefully cut the filet mignon on his plate. Across from him sat Kiana Sorrell. She wore a deep burgundy silk dress that accentuated her light skin and curvy figure. Her wavy hair fell softly, and her face was expertly made up. She was the epitome of the modern, successful woman any man would desire. Kiana set down her fork, her beautiful eyes covered by a fine mist, her voice full of remorse. "Jamal," she whispered softly, "I've bothered you again today. I know you should be home with Zendaya, but I was just so scared." Jamal looked up, and the coldness he wore at home instantly melted, replaced by an unusual tenderness. "What nonsense is that? You had a nightmare. Of course you should call me." "But," Kiana bit her lip, "I'm afraid your mother will make things difficult for Zendaya. When you called earlier, her voice didn't sound very happy." She sighed like a fragile flower in the wind. "I feel sorry for her. She was used to living in the country. Coming to a city like Atlanta can't be easy. And since she can't read or write, she can't even communicate. She must feel so lonely." Jamal laughed coldly, the tenderness vanishing as soon as Zendaya's name was mentioned. "Pity her? Please. A country girl who, thanks to my grandfather, gets to wear silk. Securing the position of Mrs. Sterling is the luckiest break of her life. She should be grateful instead of walking around with that funeral face every day." He looked at Kiana, his gaze tender once more. He pulled a dark blue velvet box from his jacket pocket. "This is for you." Kiana covered her mouth, her eyes wide with surprise. Inside, a diamond necklace sparkled, featuring a heart-shaped pendant with an extremely rare pink diamond. "Kiana, this is the heart of the Atlantic," Jamal said, his voice full of affection. "I picked it up at an auction in London last month. Only you deserve things like this." Kiana stood, walked around the table, and personally fastened the necklace. His cold skin brushed the back of her neck, making her shiver slightly. She turned, wrapped her arms around his neck, her gaze passionate. "Jamal, you're so good to me." Her breath, scented with expensive perfume, brushed his face. "But I'm scared." "Scared of what?" he asked, pulling her close by the waist. "I'm scared that we'll go on like this forever. I love you, but I don't want to be the other woman eternally. I want to be with you openly." Kiana looked at him, her eyes welling with tears. "So when can I officially be your wife, Jamal?" Her question struck the frustration Jamal was hiding. Yes, Zendaya Vance, the thorn in his side, his greatest obstacle. He hated her existence, he hated her silence, he hated her humble origins and her ignorance. If it weren't for the 20% of shares his grandfather had placed in her name in a trust, he would have kicked her out of the Sterling family long ago. But now, the Sterling Group was in trouble. Jamal released Kiana and returned to his seat. He looked at the brilliant lights outside the window. Kiana sensed the change immediately. She sat down. Instead of pressing him, she switched to a concerned tone. "The company is having problems again, isn't it? That European project?" Jamal nodded. "We have a liquidity problem. That old fool, Mr. Preston Hayes on the board, is pushing to see the books." Kiana frowned. She wasn't just a pretty face. "Jamal, what if we use Zendaya's shares?" Jamal's eyes darkened. "Those shares are locked up in my grandfather's trust. They only take effect if she voluntarily signs the transfer." Kiana smiled, a knowing smile full of unspoken meaning that Jamal didn't perceive. "Have you forgotten?" she said softly. "She can't read or write." The attic room was cold and empty. It was the complete opposite of the luxury downstairs. There were no wool rugs or mahogany furniture, just a hard twin bed and an old desk. This had been Zendaya Vance's world for the past 3 years. She silently closed the thin wooden door and slid the bolt. The dry click of the latch echoed like a switch separating two worlds. The moment the door closed, Zendaya's submissive, frightened appearance vanished. Her back, previously slightly stooped in resignation, straightened. Her eyes, always lowered and elusive, lifted. In the darkness, they were sharp and cold as ice. She went under the bed and pulled out a metal briefcase, carefully secured with a code. She opened it. Inside wasn't country clothing, but a customized military-grade security laptop, a Scap-100, a model that couldn't be bought with money. Zendaya sat at the desk and booted the computer. The screen didn't show the usual Windows or macOS interface, but a proprietary encrypted operating system. After 3 layers of complex passwords and retinal verification, the main screen lit up. It wasn't covered in shopping websites or entertainment. The entire screen was covered in complex graphs, running algorithms, and global stock market data updated every nanosecond. She accessed an end-to-end encrypted email system. The inbox instantly filled with a series of unread emails. Subject: JPM Ariadna. We need your opinion on the Federal Reserve's upcoming bond issuance. Subject: FMA. Ariadna, the $500 billion rescue package you predicted has failed. The London market is chaos. Subject: TR. Ariadna, we don't understand your model. How did you know the Norwegian sovereign fund was going to divest? Ariadna, a mythical name in the clandestine financial world. She was a living legend, a mysterious analyst who had never revealed her face, someone who accurately predicted the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008 when she was just a teenager, and who warned about the 2024 tech bubble. All this charade was for a promise. Zendaya opened a hidden file. It was the only photograph she kept of herself with an older, kind-looking man. Grandfather Theron Sterling, the man who had saved her life and her family's in that tragic flood years ago. On his deathbed, he didn't call Jamal, he called her. Zendaya held his hand, his breath weak. I'm sorry, I haven't raised Jamal well. Arrogance and prejudice have blinded him. He doesn't see your worth. Wall Street would pay hundreds of millions of dollars just to know Ariadna's identity. They could never imagine that the Ariadna they were searching for was the illiterate wife, Zendaya Vance, living in an attic of the Sterling family's Buckhead estate. Not only did she know how to read and write, but she had graduated summa cum laude with a double major in applied mathematics from Harvard and quantitative finance from MIT. She was fluent in 7 languages, not 5. If he betrays you, Zendaya, you owe him nothing. Use that sword and the 30% of shares I secretly left you in another trust, and take back everything that is yours. Show no mercy. 3 years had passed. She had given him countless opportunities, but in return, she had only received humiliation, coldness, and the mention of Kiana. Zendaya returned to the screen, opening another window monitoring the Sterling Group stock. It was plummeting. She clearly saw Jamal's poor investment decisions. He had been overly confident trying to enter the European biotechnology market without proper preparation. The group's liquidity was running out. In just 10 minutes, with some short sell and buyback orders, she could easily save the situation. But she didn't. The promise to Grandfather Theron still resonated. If he betrays you. The betrayal hadn't officially happened yet. She was still waiting. She scrolled through the emails, rapidly typing complex command lines, giving instructions to the world's largest investment banks. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, creating a blur. Exit the German market, short sell the Nikkei, buy gold, restructure Argentina's debt. After 1 hour of work, she closed the laptop, put it back in the briefcase, and locked it. Ariadna disappeared. Zendaya Vance, the country girl and illiterate wife, was back. She sat on the bed, listening to the roar of Jamal's sports car outside. He was back, but he wouldn't come up here. He didn't even consider this room part of the house. The coldness of the attic seemed to infiltrate her heart. in the CEO's office of the Sterling Group, located in the Sterling Tower in downtown Atlanta, crash. The crystal ashtray was hurled by Jamal Sterling against the opposite wall, shattering into pieces. "Useless! A bunch of useless fools!" he yelled at his department heads via video call. "I pay you millions of dollars a year, and you can't solve a simple liquidity problem? The German banks are refusing to extend the loan. Why?" The directors lowered their heads. No one dared to answer. The European biotechnology project had failed miserably. It was burning through the Sterling Group's cash faster than a furnace. Shareholders had already started asking questions. Jamal hung up the call abruptly, loosening his tie. He was truly in trouble. Just then, the office door opened softly. Kiana Sorrell entered, holding a cup of hot coffee. She wasn't wearing a secretary's uniform, but a tight, sensual dress. "Jamal," she said softly, walking around the desk and placing her hands on his shoulders, gently massaging them. "Don't get upset. I'm sure there's a solution." Her warmth and perfume calmed Jamal slightly. He closed his eyes, leaning back in the chair. "What solution? All the banks have turned their backs on me." Kiana smiled. "The banks might have turned their backs on you, but the Sterling family hasn't." Jamal opened his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I just remembered," Kiana said, as if by chance. "I think Grandfather Theron left Zendaya some shares before he died." "It was 20%, Jamal frowned. "Yes, but they're locked in a trust. They're useless unless she voluntarily signs the transfer, and she—" "But isn't she your wife?" Kiana interrupted, her voice full of implication. "A wife has a responsibility to share her husband's burdens. No?" Jamal looked at her. "Say what you have to say." "She trusts you a lot," Kiana said, her fingers lightly trailing across his chest. "Besides, I hear she can't read or write. If it's to save the group, to save the family, perhaps she'd agree to sign some papers to help the company. After all, she's a Sterling, too." A chilling silence filled the office. Jamal suddenly realized. He looked at Kiana. She's illiterate. A cruel, excited smile slowly formed on his handsome face. It's true. An illiterate person knows nothing about stock transfer contracts. Kiana, seeing that he understood, added, "This weekend, the Atlanta High Society is hosting the Hope and Legacy Charity Gala to raise funds for disadvantaged children. There will be lots of reporters." She looked at him passionately. "If you bring Zendaya, you show your love as husband and wife, and then, casually, you sign some donation papers in front of everyone. No one will suspect a thing." When Jamal entered the house, Zendaya instinctively took a step back, bracing herself for the usual insults or indifference. But today, Jamal did not walk past her. He stopped. "Zendaya." His voice wasn't cold. It could almost be called kind. Zendaya looked up, her eyes wide, showing surprise and a little fear. It was the first time in 3 years he had said her name without a hint of contempt. "I'm taking you to an event this weekend," he said, trying to sound natural. Zendaya shook her head hastily, her hands gripping her apron. I can't go. I don't know how to socialize. I'll embarrass you." "It doesn't matter." Jamal was unusually patient, even taking a step toward her. "It's a very significant charity event. You just need to be there with me." He looked at her. "There will be a large donation for underprivileged children. I want you to represent the Sterling family and sign the donation papers." Zendaya stared at him, trying to find sincerity in his eyes, but she only saw thinly veiled falsehood. "Get yourself a decent outfit," he added, turning away, but maintaining the kind tone. "Don't worry, I'll be there." He left the kitchen. Zendaya stood motionless, her hands tightly clasped. A charity event, signing papers. Jamal, who had always considered her a blight, was willingly taking her to a place full of reporters. She knew the Sterling Group's situation well. She knew he was desperate. The fish had finally bitten the hook. The St. Regis Atlanta, the Hope and Legacy Charity Gala, was indeed extremely luxurious. Media and prominent Atlanta figures were all present. Jamal Sterling, in an elegant tuxedo, stepped out of a Rolls-Royce. He walked around the car to open the door, and the person who stepped out was not Kiana, as usual, but Zendaya Vance. She wore a simple long beige dress, her hair pulled back into a low bun. The clothes were clean, but compared to the designer gowns and glitter around her, she looked like a sparrow